I was standing in my driveway in Phoenix, Arizona, staring at what looked like the beginning of World War III, when Brenda Hoffmeyer marched across the street with her phone held up like a weapon, already recording me. Let me back up a bit. My name is Lawson, and I had just moved into the Sunridge Estates community 3 months ago. The house was perfect. 4 bedrooms, a nice backyard, and most importantly for a guy like me who worked from home as an IT consultant, it had a dedicated office space with great natural light. What I didn't know when I signed those papers was that the HOA president, Brenda, treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. The backup propane tank sitting in my driveway wasn't some random purchase. Arizona summers are brutal, and after the power grid issues we had last year across the state, I wanted to make sure I had a reliable backup generator system. I had done my research, talked to contractors, and spent nearly $8,000 on a whole house backup generator that ran on propane. The main tank was already installed on the side of my house, properly permitted and everything. This second tank was meant to go next to it, giving me enough fuel capacity to run essential systems for up to 2 weeks if the power went out. Excuse me. Brenda's voice cut through the peaceful Saturday morning like nails on a chalkboard. She was wearing her usual uniform, athletic, where that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, oversized sunglasses, and that haircut. You know the one. She was probably in her late 40s, but the amount of work she had done made it hard to tell. "Good morning, Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice pleasant. I had learned in my 3 months here that Brenda fed off conflict like some kind of energy vampire. "Don't you good morning me," she snapped, her phone still pointed at my face. "What is that monstrosity doing in your driveway?" I glanced at the propane tank, which was sitting exactly where the delivery truck had placed it an hour ago. "It's a propane tank. The installation crew is coming Monday morning to set it up with my generator system." "Absolutely not." She said it like she had any authority over what I did on my own property. "That is a clear violation of the HOA covenants, codes, and restrictions. Section 12, subsection 4 clearly states that no unsightly equipment may be visible from the street." "It's not going to be visible from the street," I explained, holding on to my patience with both hands. "It's going on the side of my house, behind the fence line. It's only in the driveway temporarily because the installation isn't until Monday." Brenda took a step closer, and I could see her jaw clenching. "I don't care about your installation schedule. That thing is an eyesore right now, and I'm documenting this violation. You'll be receiving a fine." "A fine? For something that's going to be moved in 2 days. The CCRs don't have exceptions for temporary inconveniences," she said, practically spitting the words. "But I'll tell you what, I'll waive the fine if you let me have that tank." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "You want my propane tank? My generator only has 1 tank, and I could use the extra capacity." She said this like it was the most reasonable request in the world. "You're clearly having issues with yours, so why don't you just give me this one, and you can order another one once you get your situation figured out." "I'm not having issues. The installation is scheduled. Everything is on track." I was trying really hard to keep my cool. "And no, I'm not giving you my $800 propane tank." Her expression went from entitled to furious in about half a second. "Then you're looking at daily fines of $100 until that thing is removed from view. And trust me, Isaac, I will make sure those fines stick." "You know what, Brenda? Do whatever you need to do. The tank will be installed Monday and you won't be able to see it from the street. We're done here." I turned and started walking toward my front door. "This isn't over," she shouted after me. "I'll be calling an emergency HOA board meeting about this. You're going to regret not cooperating with me." I went inside and closed the door, then immediately pulled out my phone to text my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 2 houses down. Marcus had warned me about Brenda when I first moved in, sharing horror stories about her trying to fine people for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox posts. "Brenda just tried to get me to give her my backup propane tank," I typed, then threatened me with fines when I said no. His response came back in seconds. "LOL, classic Brenda. She tried to make me cut down my mesquite tree last year because she didn't like the way it looked. Stand your ground. She's mostly hot air." I wanted to believe that, but something about the look in her eyes when she stormed off made me uneasy. I had dealt with difficult people before in my line of work, but Brenda was operating on a different level entirely. The rest of Saturday passed without incident. I kept an eye on the driveway through my window, half expecting Brenda to come back with reinforcements or maybe try to steal the tank herself. But the street stayed quiet, and by evening I had almost convinced myself that the whole thing would blow over. Sunday morning proved me wrong. I woke up to my doorbell ringing repeatedly, followed by aggressive knocking. When I opened the door, still in my pajamas and desperately needing coffee, I found a manila envelope taped to my door and Brenda's husband, Gary, standing on my walkway looking uncomfortable. "Sorry about this," Gary mumbled. He was a thin guy with a perpetually defeated expression, and I actually felt bad for him. "Brenda wanted me to make sure you got the papers." I pulled the envelope off my door. "What papers?" "Legal notice of HOA violation and intent to file lawsuit." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Look, between you and me, I think this is crazy, but when Brenda gets an idea in her head—" "It's fine, Gary, not your fault." I opened the envelope and started reading while he hurried back across the street. The document was 3 pages of legal-sounding garbage, but the gist was clear. Brenda was claiming that my propane tank violated multiple HOA rules, that I was creating a safety hazard, and that if I didn't remove it immediately and pay $1,000 in accumulated fines, the HOA would pursue legal action against me. There was also a handwritten note at the bottom in Brenda's sharp, angular handwriting. "Last chance to do this the easy way. Give me the tank and this all goes away." I stood there in my doorway, reading this insanity, and felt my blood pressure rising. This woman was actually threatening to sue me because I wouldn't give her my property. It was beyond absurd. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone. First, I called my real estate attorney, Daniel Martinez, who had handled my house purchase. He listened to the whole story, asked me to email him photos of the tank, the installation contract, and Brenda's legal notice. "This is harassment," Daniel said flatly. "The tank is temporary in your driveway, you have permits for the installation, and she has absolutely no legal right to demand you give her your property. I'll draft a response for you." Next, I called the installation company and explained the situation. The crew supervisor, a guy named Tom, laughed when I told him about Brenda wanting the tank. "We get HOA issues sometimes, but that's a new one," he said. "Look, I can see if we can move your installation up. Let me make some calls." By noon, Tom called me back with good news. They had a cancellation and could come out first thing Monday morning instead of later in the week. That meant the tank would be installed and out of sight within 24 hours. I thanked him profusely and felt a tiny bit of relief. Then my doorbell rang again. This time it was a Phoenix police officer, looking bored and hot in the late morning sun. My heart sank. "Isaac Lawson?" he asked. "That's me. I got a call about a potential hazardous material violation. Someone reported that you have an improperly stored propane tank on your property." He was already looking past me at the driveway, where the tank sat exactly where it had been all weekend, "Officer, that tank was delivered Saturday morning and is being professionally installed tomorrow. It's not a violation of anything." I tried to keep my voice calm and respectful. He walked over to the tank, looked it over, and checked something on his phone. "Is it secured? The delivery company chained it to my fence post, see?" I pointed to the heavy chain wrapped through the tank's base ring. "You have paperwork for the installation." I pulled up the contract on my phone and showed him. He read through it, nodded, and made some notes. "You're fine," he said finally. "The tank is properly secured for temporary storage. You have a licensed contractor doing the installation, and you're not violating any city codes." Whoever called this in was wasting everyone's time. Let me guess. Brenda Hoffmeyer. The officer's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. "I can't disclose who made the report. But for what it's worth, this isn't the first time I've been called to this neighborhood for HOA disputes." He handed me a card. "If you have any issues, give us a call. Harassment is harassment, regardless of whether it's HOA related." After he left, I seriously considered Marcus's earlier advice about standing my ground. This was getting ridiculous, and we were only on day 2. I decided to do some digging. I pulled up the HOA covenants, codes, and restrictions on my laptop and spent the afternoon reading through all 78 pages of mind-numbing legalese. Section 12, subsection 4, which Brenda had cited, did mention that unsightly equipment couldn't be visible from the street. But it specifically referred to permanent installations. Temporary situations during construction or installation weren't mentioned at all. More interestingly, I found Section 32, which detailed the process for HOA enforcement actions. Any fine over $50 required a board vote with at least 3 members present. Any legal action required a majority vote of the entire 5-member board. Brenda couldn't just unilaterally decide to fine me $1,000 or sue me. I emailed Daniel, my attorney, with this information. His response was immediate and gleeful. "This gets better and better. She's not following her own rules. I'm drafting a formal response that's going to make her day very unpleasant." Monday morning arrived with typical Phoenix heat. I was up at 6, drinking coffee and watching the street for the installation crew. They showed up at 7:30 sharp, 3 guys in a truck with the company logo, all professional and efficient. Tom, the crew supervisor I had spoken to on the phone, walked around the tank and then the side of my house where the installation would go. "This is perfect," he said. "We'll have this done by noon, easy." They got to work, and I went back inside to start my workday. I had client calls scheduled and couldn't spend the whole morning watching them, but I kept one eye on the window. At 8:15, Brenda appeared. She marched right up to Tom, who was directing his crew, and started gesturing wildly. I couldn't hear what she was saying from inside, but her body language was pure aggression. Tom looked confused, then annoyed, and finally he pointed at my front door. I was outside in seconds. "What's the problem?" I asked, though I knew exactly what the problem was. "I'm informing these gentlemen that they don't have authorization to work on this property," Brenda announced. She had printed papers in her hand, waving them around. "The HOA has not approved this installation." Tom looked at me with an expression that said he had dealt with this kind of thing before but would never get used to it. "Sir, is this your property?" "Yes." "Do you want us to continue with the installation as contracted?" "Yes." Tom turned to Brenda. "Madam, we have all the proper city permits and the homeowner's authorization. We're going to continue working." "I'll have you arrested for trespassing," Brenda threatened. "Go ahead and call the police," Tom said calmly. "We'll wait." He pulled out his phone. "Actually, I'll call them myself. I want an officer here to document that we're working legally and being harassed." Brenda's face went through several shades of red. "You can't do that, madam." "I absolutely can. We deal with this kind of thing more than you'd think." Tom was already dialing. "Phoenix non-emergency line, right?" I watched Brenda's face as she realized she was beaten, at least for the moment. She spun on her heel and stormed off, but not before shooting me a look that could have melted steel. "You're going to regret this, Isaac," she called over her shoulder. "I promise you that." The police did come, the same officer from yesterday actually, and he looked even more bored than before. He verified the permits, confirmed the crew had a right to be there, and left. The installation continued without further interruption. By 1 in the afternoon, both propane tanks were installed on the side of my house, completely hidden from street view by my fence, and some strategic landscaping the crew had helped me arrange. The generator was connected, tested, and running perfectly. Tom showed me how to operate everything and made me run through the startup sequence twice. "You're all set," he said, packing up his tools. "And for what it's worth, I've installed about 200 of these systems around Phoenix, and yours is one of the cleanest installations we've done. Your HOA lady has no grounds to complain about anything." I thanked him and his crew, tipped them extra for dealing with Brenda's nonsense, and finally felt like I could breathe again. The tank was installed, it was legal, it was invisible from the street, and Brenda had no leg to stand on. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Tuesday morning, I found a new notice taped to my door. This one was an official HOA board meeting summons, scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 p.m. at the community center. The agenda had one item: discussion and vote on enforcement action against 2847 Desert Bloom Drive regarding unauthorized installations and homeowner misconduct. That was my address. And homeowner misconduct was a nice touch. I forwarded the notice to Daniel, who called me within an hour. "They're actually going through with this," he said, and I could hear him typing in the background. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to attend this meeting with you as your legal counsel. I want you to gather every piece of documentation you have. Permits, installation contracts, photos of the final installation, copies of all communications with Brenda, everything. Can they actually find me, or do anything to me? They can try, but they won't succeed. Based on what you've told me and what I'm reading in their own CCRs, they don't have a case. But we need to be prepared and professional. These things can get ugly." Wednesday passed in a blur of work and preparation. I printed out everything Daniel asked for, organized it in a folder, and took extensive photos of the propane tanks and generator setup. You couldn't see any of it from the street. You couldn't even see it from my neighbors' yards unless you really tried. It was as unobtrusive as possible. Marcus stopped by Wednesday evening with a 6-pack of beer and moral support. "Dude, the whole neighborhood is talking about this," he said, settling into my patio chair. "Brenda's been going house to house trying to get people riled up about your dangerous propane hoarding." Propane hoarding. I nearly choked on my beer. "That's what she's calling it. She's telling people you have enough fuel to blow up the whole block." Marcus shook his head. "Most people think she's lost it, but there's always a few who buy into her drama." "Who's on the HOA board besides Brenda?" "There's Gerald Hopkins. He's the treasurer. Pretty reasonable guy, retired accountant. Then there's Patricia Chambers. She usually votes however Brenda wants. Then there's young Stephanie Ruiz. She's only been on the board for 6 months and seems kind of intimidated by Brenda. And the 5th seat has been empty since old Mr. Henderson passed away last year. So 3 board members, and one of them is in Brenda's pocket. Pretty much. But Gerald has stood up to her before. There's hope." Thursday evening came faster than I wanted. Daniel met me at my house at 6:30, and we walked over to the community center together. He was in his mid-30s, sharp dresser, and had the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're absolutely right. "Remember," he said as we approached the building, "stay calm, be respectful, and let me do most of the talking. Don't let Brenda bait you into an argument." The community center meeting room was already half full when we arrived. I recognized most of my neighbors, including Marcus, who gave me a thumbs up from his seat. Brenda was at the front table with Gerald and Patricia, and a younger woman I assumed was Stephanie. They had a fancy setup with a laptop and projector, which seemed like overkill for an HOA meeting. Brenda's eyes narrowed when she saw Daniel. "This is a closed HOA meeting. Outsiders aren't permitted." "I'm Mr. Lawson's legal counsel," Daniel said smoothly, handing her a business card. "According to your CCRs, Section 41, homeowners are permitted to bring legal representation to any board meeting where enforcement actions are being discussed." I watched Brenda's jaw clench as she checked something on her laptop. She couldn't argue with him because he was right. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "Take a seat." The meeting started with standard HOA business, approving last month's minutes, discussing the landscaping contract, debating whether to repaint the community center. It was all incredibly boring, and I could tell Brenda was dragging it out to make me sweat. Finally, 45 minutes in, she got to the main event. "Item 6 on the agenda," Brenda announced, and the projector screen lit up with a photo of my house. Specifically, a photo of my driveway from Saturday morning with the propane tank sitting there. "We have a serious safety and aesthetic violation at 2847 Desert Bloom Drive." She clicked through a slideshow that she had clearly spent hours preparing. Photos of the tank from every angle, printed out sections of the CCRs with passages highlighted, and even a news article about a propane explosion that had happened in Florida 3 years ago. "Isaac Lawson has installed not one but 2 massive propane tanks on his property without HOA approval," Brenda continued, her voice taking on a dramatic quality. "These tanks represent a clear and present danger to everyone in this community. Propane is highly explosive. One spark, one accident, and we could all be killed in our sleep." I started to stand up, but Daniel put a hand on my arm and shook his head slightly. "Furthermore," Brenda went on, "Mr. Lawson has been hostile and uncooperative throughout this process. When I tried to help him find an alternative solution, he responded with verbal abuse and threats." "That's a lie," I said before I could stop myself. Brenda smiled. "The record will show that Mr. Lawson is combative and cannot conduct himself appropriately at official HOA meetings." Daniel stood up. "May I address the board?" Gerald, the treasurer, spoke for the first time. "Go ahead." "Thank you. My name is Daniel Martinez, and I'm representing Mr. Lawson in this matter." He pulled out his own folder. "First, let's address the allegations, Miss Hoffmeyer claims the propane tanks were installed without HOA approval. However, your own CCRs don't require HOA approval for generator systems or fuel storage. They require that such installations not be visible from the street and comply with all city codes." He pulled out photos and passed them to the board. "These photos, taken this afternoon, clearly show that nothing is visible from the street. The installation is completely screened by Mr. Lawson's fence line and landscaping. Second," Daniel continued, "Miss Hoffmeyer has raised safety concerns. Mr. Lawson's propane system was installed by a licensed contractor, inspected by the city, and meets all Phoenix fire codes. I have the inspection report here." He passed up more papers. "The fire marshal's office signed off on this installation, unless Miss Hoffmeyer is claiming to know more about propane safety than the Phoenix Fire Department, Her concerns are baseless. I could see Brenda fuming, but Daniel wasn't done. Third, regarding Mr. Lawson's alleged hostility and threats, I'd like to submit evidence to the contrary. He pulled out his phone. This is a recording of Saturday morning's interaction between Miss Hoffmeyer and Mr. Lawson. That's illegal, Brenda shouted. Actually, Arizona is a one-party consent state for recordings, Daniel said calmly. Mr. Lawson was well within his rights to record a conversation he was participating in. Would the board like to hear it? Gerald nodded. Yes, please. Daniel played the audio on his phone, volume turned up. You could hear everything. Brenda demanding the tank, threatening fines, and me calmly refusing and trying to explain the installation schedule. There was no verbal abuse, no threats from me at all. Just Brenda getting increasingly aggressive as I refused to hand over my property. When the recording ended, the room was silent. Even Patricia, Brenda's usual ally, looked uncomfortable. Finally, Daniel said, I'd like to address the attempted fines. Miss Hoffmeyer sent Mr. Lawson a notice claiming he owed $1,000 in fines. However, according to your own CCRs, any fine over $50 requires a vote by the board with at least 3 members present. No such vote occurred. Miss Hoffmeyer acted unilaterally and outside her authority as HOA president. Gerald was nodding now, making notes on a legal pad. Stephanie, the younger board member, looked shocked. Patricia was staring at the table. In conclusion, Daniel said, Mr. Lawson has violated no rules, broken no laws, and conducted himself professionally, despite significant harassment from Miss Hoffmeyer. He requests that this matter be dismissed, and that the board take appropriate action to prevent further harassment. Brenda shot to her feet. This is outrageous. I'm the president of this HOA, and I don't have to sit here and be insulted by some lawyer who doesn't even live here. Brenda, Gerald said quietly, sit down. Excuse me, sit down. We need to discuss this as a board. For a moment I thought Brenda was going to explode. Her face was purple, her hands were shaking, and she looked like she wanted to flip the entire table. But she sat down, radiating fury. Gerald turned to Stephanie and Patricia. I move that we dismiss all alleged violations against Mr. Lawson. The evidence clearly shows he's complied with all HOA rules and city codes. All in favor. Wait, Brenda started, but Gerald cut her off. This requires a vote, Brenda. You don't get to decide unilaterally. He looked at the other board members. All in favor of dismissing the violations. Gerald raised his hand. After a moment, Stephanie did too. Patricia looked at Brenda, then at Gerald, and slowly raised her hand. Motion carries, 3-1, Gerald said, making a note. Mr. Lawson, you're cleared of all violations. I apologize for the inconvenience. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but Daniel wasn't finished. I'd also like to request that the board review Miss Hoffmeyer's conduct during this incident, he said. She filed a false police report claiming hazardous materials violations. She attempted to levy unauthorized fines. She made demands for Mr. Lawson's personal property. This goes beyond HOA enforcement and into harassment and potential criminal conduct. That's slander, Brenda shrieked. It's documented fact, Daniel replied. And if necessary, Mr. Lawson is prepared to file a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA conduct in this state. We'd prefer to resolve this at the community level, but Mr. Lawson has a right to live in his home without harassment. Gerald looked at Brenda with something like disappointment. We'll need to discuss this in executive session. Mr. Lawson, Mr. Martinez, thank you for coming tonight. We'll be in touch. As Daniel and I left the community center, followed by Marcus and several other neighbors who wanted to congratulate me, I heard Brenda's voice rising behind us, arguing with Gerald and the other board members. "That went well," Marcus said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Did you see Brenda's face when your lawyer played that recording?" "I still can't believe she tried to claim I threatened her," I said, adrenaline still pumping through my system. Daniel packed his folder back into his briefcase. "People like her count on others not pushing back. She's used to bullying homeowners into compliance. When someone actually stands up to her with documentation and legal backing, she doesn't know how to handle it." "So, is this over?" I asked. "From a legal standpoint, yes. The board cleared you of violations. But based on her behavior tonight, I'd say keep documenting everything. People like Brenda don't let things go easily." He was right. Friday morning, I woke up to find my mailbox had been vandalized. Someone had spray painted "Danger" across it in red paint. I took photos and called the non-emergency police line to file a report. The same officer from earlier in the week came out, took my statement, and said they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. "Let me guess," he said, looking at the mailbox. "This is related to your HOA situation." "Probably." He made some notes. "I can't prove who did this without evidence, but I'll make sure to include this in the ongoing incident report. If you have security cameras, now would be a good time to install them." I spent Friday afternoon at Home Depot buying a Ring doorbell camera and 2 additional outdoor cameras to cover my driveway and side yard. While I was installing them, Gary, Brenda's husband, walked by with their dog. "Isaac," he said quietly, looking around like he was afraid of being seen talking to me. "I'm sorry about your mailbox and everything else. Did Brenda do it?" "I don't know for sure. She left the house around midnight last night, said she was going for a drive to clear her head. She was gone for about an hour." He looked miserable. "I've tried talking to her, but when she gets fixated on something, there's no reasoning with her. Gary, you should know that if this continues, I'm going to have to take legal action. I don't want to, but I can't live like this." "I understand, I really do." He glanced back at his house. "I should go. Just wanted you to know that not everyone across the street is crazy." The weekend passed quietly, which made me nervous. I kept expecting another confrontation, another vandalized mailbox, something, but nothing happened. I caught up on work, tested my generator system again, and tried to relax. Monday morning brought a new development. I got an email from Gerald Hopkins, the HOA treasurer, asking if I could meet with him for coffee. He suggested a Starbucks off the neighborhood property, which seemed strategic. I met him there Tuesday morning. Gerald was in his late 60s, gray hair, kind face, and he looked exhausted. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "I wanted to talk to you off the record about what's been happening." "Okay." The board met in executive session Friday night after the community meeting. We discussed Brenda's conduct at length. Patricia and Stephanie both agreed that she overstepped her authority significantly. He sighed. "I proposed that we vote to remove her as president and elect a new leader." Patricia abstained, but Stephanie voted with me. It was 2-1. "So Brenda's not president anymore?" "Not exactly." Gerald looked uncomfortable. "The bylaws require 3 votes for such a major action. With only 2 votes, we couldn't remove her. But we did pass a motion unanimously to formally censure her and require board approval for any future enforcement actions. She can't go rogue anymore." "Will that actually stop her?" "Legally, yes. Practically," he shrugged. "Brenda doesn't like being told no. Between you and me, I've been on this board for 8 years, and I've seen her get worse and worse. She treats this neighborhood like a dictatorship. Why hasn't anyone stopped her before? Most people don't want the hassle of fighting back. They pay the fines, make the changes she demands, and try to stay off her radar. You're the first person in years who actually stood up to her with legal representation." He smiled slightly. "It was impressive, watching your attorney dismantle her arguments like that. So what happens now? We hope she calms down and follows the new restrictions. But Isaac, I'm telling you this as a neighbor, not as a board member. Watch your back. Brenda doesn't forgive and she doesn't forget." His warning proved prophetic. 2 weeks went by without incident. I started to think maybe, just maybe, Brenda had actually been reined in by the board's censure. My security cameras hadn't caught anything suspicious, work was going well, and life in Sunridge Estates was almost pleasant. Then I got a letter from the Arizona Department of Water Resources. According to them, I was being investigated for illegal water usage and potential well drilling without permits. Someone had filed a complaint claiming I was operating an unpermitted well on my property. I didn't have a well. I had never even considered drilling a well. I was on city water like everyone else in the neighborhood. I called the number on the letter and spent an hour on the phone with a bureaucrat named Stephen, who seemed as confused as I was. "Sir, we have to investigate every complaint we receive," he explained. "Someone filed a detailed report claiming you were extracting groundwater without proper permits. We'll need to send an inspector out to verify." "There's nothing to verify. I don't have a well." "Then the inspection will be quick and easy. How's Thursday at 10 a.m.? The inspector, a woman named Jennifer, showed up Thursday morning with official credentials and a clipboard. She walked around my entire property, checked my water meter, looked at my irrigation system, and confirmed what I already knew. No well. "Whoever filed this complaint either had bad information or was deliberately wasting our time," Jennifer said, making notes. "You're clearly on city water. I'll file my report, and you'll receive official clearance in about a week. Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" "It was anonymous, but they provided detailed information about your property address and layout. Usually anonymous complaints don't include that much detail." She looked at me knowingly. "You have a problem with a neighbor. You could say that." After she left, I called Daniel and filled him in on the latest development. "That's filing a false report with a state agency," he said immediately. "That's actually a misdemeanor in Arizona. If you can prove Brenda filed it, we could pursue charges. But it was anonymous. For now. I'll make some calls. State agencies keep records of these things, including IP addresses and phone numbers if the complaint was filed online or called in." While Daniel worked on that angle, I decided it was time to go on offense. I started documenting everything about Brenda's behavior, building a comprehensive file. I talked to other neighbors with Marcus's help and found out I wasn't her first victim. There was Mrs. Patterson 3 streets over, who had been fined $1,500 for planting roses that were supposedly the wrong shade of pink. When she couldn't pay, Brenda had filed a lien against her house. There was the Johnson family, who had been reported to Child Protective Services anonymously after they refused to remove a play structure from their backyard. The CPS investigation had cleared them, but the trauma of having someone question their parenting had been devastating. There was elderly Mr. Kowalski, who had been harassed for months about his unsightly wheelchair ramp until he finally sold his house and moved to a retirement community. The pattern was clear. Brenda had been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, and no one had been able to stop her because she hid behind HOA authority and the threat of expensive legal battles. I compiled all of this information, got written statements from willing neighbors, and gave everything to Daniel. He reviewed it with the intensity of a prosecutor building a case. "This is good," he said during our meeting the following week. "This shows a pattern of harassment and abuse of power. I think we have grounds for a civil suit against both Brenda personally and the HOA for failing to rein her in. I don't want to sue the HOA. Most of the board seems reasonable and they're trying to fix things. Then we sue Brenda personally for harassment. We document everything, file a restraining order, and make it clear that this behavior has consequences. Before we could move forward with that plan, Brenda escalated again. I came home from a grocery run on a Tuesday afternoon to find 2 Phoenix Fire Department trucks in front of my house and firefighters examining my propane tanks and generator system. My heart nearly stopped. I parked on the street and ran over. "What's going on? Is there a leak?" The fire captain, whose name tag read Morrison, turned to me. "Are you the homeowner?" "Yes, Isaac Lawson. What's wrong?" "We received a report of a gas leak at this address. We're checking your propane system." He gestured to one of his crew, who was using some kind of detection device around the tanks. "So far, we're not reading any leaks. Because there aren't any leaks. This system was professionally installed and inspected 3 weeks ago." Captain Morrison looked at his clipboard. The caller was pretty insistent, said they could smell gas and were worried about an explosion. "Who called it in?" "Anonymous call to 911. Of course it was. I pulled up my security camera app on my phone and scrubbed back through the footage. At 1:15 p.m., while I was at the grocery store, Brenda had walked into my side yard, looked at the propane tanks, and then made a phone call. The cameras didn't have audio, but the timeline was obvious. I showed Captain Morrison the footage. "That's my neighbor, Brenda Hoffmeyer. She's the HOA president, and she's been harassing me about these propane tanks since they were installed. She's the one who called in the false report." Morrison watched the video, his expression hardening. "She came onto your property without permission." "Yes. And this isn't the first false report she's filed. She called the police claiming hazardous materials violations, filed a false complaint with the water department about a non-existent well, and now this. Calling in a false emergency to 911 is a crime," Morrison said flatly. "It wastes resources and potentially puts lives at risk. If we're here dealing with a fake gas leak, we can't respond to a real emergency somewhere else. Can you do anything about it? I'm going to file a report with Phoenix PD. They'll want to see this video." He handed me his card. "Send that footage to this email address, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people." After the fire department left, having confirmed that my propane system was perfectly safe and had no leaks, I sat in my living room and tried to process what had just happened. Brenda had actually called 911 with a fake emergency. That was beyond HOA power trips. That was criminal behavior. I sent the security footage to Captain Morrison and to Daniel. I also sent it to Detective Sarah Brennan at Phoenix PD, whose name was on the incident report from my vandalized mailbox. Daniel called me within an hour. "This is it. This is where we involve law enforcement seriously. False 911 calls are prosecuted in Arizona. She could face jail time." "Will they actually arrest her?" "If the fire department and police decide to pursue charges, yes. This isn't a civil HOA dispute anymore. She's committed actual crimes." That evening, Detective Brennan called me. "Mr. Lawson, I've reviewed the footage you sent and spoken with Captain Morrison. We're going to investigate this as a false emergency report. I'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement." "Of course. Whatever you need. I'm also going to talk to your neighbors, see if anyone else witnessed or experienced similar behavior. This kind of pattern helps build a stronger case." I spent Wednesday morning at the Phoenix Police Department, giving my statement and providing copies of all my documentation. The recordings, the security footage, the false complaints to various agencies, everything. Detective Brennan took notes, asked clarifying questions, and seemed genuinely angry about what Brenda had been doing. People think because it's HOA related, it's somehow not real law enforcement's problem, she said. But harassment is harassment. False reports are false reports. The HOA doesn't give anyone immunity from criminal law. So, what happens now? Now I investigate. I'll talk to the fire department, review the 911 call recording, interview witnesses. If I have enough evidence, I'll present it to the prosecutor's office and recommend charges. How long does that take? Depends on their caseload, but usually a few weeks. In the meantime, I'd suggest keeping your security cameras running and documenting anything else that happens. I left the police station feeling a mix of vindication and anxiety. This whole situation had spiraled so far beyond a simple HOA dispute. All because I wouldn't give Brenda my propane tank. The next few days were tense. I worked from home, kept an eye on my security cameras, and waited. Marcus stopped by regularly to check on me and provide updates from the neighborhood gossip network. Everyone knows the cops are investigating Brenda, he said over beers on my patio Friday evening. Patricia Chambers resigned from the HOA board yesterday. She said she didn't want to be associated with Brenda anymore. So now the board is down to 3 people. Yeah, Gerald, Stephanie, and Brenda. And Gerald is pushing for another vote to remove Brenda as president now that it would only take 2 votes total. Will Stephanie vote for it? Word is yes. She's apparently pretty shaken up about the criminal investigation. She doesn't want to be part of an HOA board that's under scrutiny. Monday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after the false 911 call, I got a call from Detective Brennan. Mr. Lawson, I wanted to let you know that the prosecutor's office has decided to file charges against Brenda Hoffmeyer. She's being charged with 1 count of false reporting to emergency services, 1 count of criminal trespass, and 1 count of filing a false instrument with a government agency, which relates to the water department complaint. My heart was pounding. What happens now? A warrant will be issued for her arrest. Given the non-violent nature of the charges, she'll likely be able to post bond immediately, but she'll have to go through the booking process and will face trial. Thank you, Detective. I know this probably seems like a minor case compared to what you usually handle. Actually, Mr. Lawson, cases like this matter a lot. When people abuse positions of authority to harass others, it creates real harm. Your neighbor has been terrorizing people in your community for years. It's about time someone held her accountable. That evening, I watched from my window as 2 police cars pulled up to Brenda's house across the street. Officers knocked on the door, talked to Gary, and then Brenda emerged. Even from a distance, I could see she was yelling. They cuffed her, put her in the back of a patrol car, and drove away. Gary stood in the doorway, looking like his whole world had collapsed. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The neighborhood was buzzing with the news by nightfall. Marcus texted me a picture that someone had posted in the community Facebook group. Brenda's mugshot from the jail website, along with the charges. The comments were running about 80% supportive of the arrest and 20% calling it an overreaction. I didn't sleep much that night, half expecting retaliation. But my security cameras stayed quiet. Tuesday morning, I got an email from Gerald Hopkins. The HOA board had held an emergency meeting Monday night and voted, 2-1, to remove Brenda Hoffmeyer as president, pending the outcome of her criminal case. Gerald was now serving as interim president. The email also included an apology on behalf of the board for the harassment I had experienced. While Ms. Hoffmeyer's actions were her own, the board acknowledges that we should have intervened more forcefully earlier in this situation. We are committed to reforming HOA procedures to prevent this kind of abuse of power in the future. It was a nice gesture, but the real question was what Brenda would do now. She had posted bond according to the public records and was out of jail pending her trial. I kept my cameras running and my doors locked. Wednesday brought another surprise. A process server showed up at my door with papers. My stomach dropped, thinking Brenda was somehow suing me despite everything. But when I read the documents, I realized they were actually for her. Daniel had filed a civil lawsuit against Brenda on my behalf, seeking damages for harassment, emotional distress, and the costs of legal defense. He had sent a courtesy copy to me and had Brenda formally served. When I called him, he sounded pleased with himself. I waited until after the criminal charges were filed so we could reference them in the civil complaint. It strengthens our case significantly. What are we asking for? $25,000 in damages, plus legal fees. It's not about the money, really. It's about making it clear that her behavior has real consequences. She's going to lose her mind. Probably. But she's also going to have to explain to her defense attorney why she's being sued civilly while facing criminal charges. That might actually help motivate a plea deal in the criminal case. As Daniel predicted, things moved quickly after that. Brenda's attorney, trying to manage both the criminal charges and the civil lawsuit, reached out to Daniel about a possible settlement. She's willing to pay $15,000 to make the civil suit go away, Daniel told me during our phone call the following week. She's also going to plead no contest to the false 911 call charge in exchange for the other charges being dropped. What would no contest mean for her? Probation, probably. Maybe a fine and community service. She'd have a conviction on her record, which would make it much harder for her to hold any kind of position of authority in the future. Most HOAs wouldn't let someone with a criminal record serve on the board. What do you think I should do? Daniel paused. Honestly, take the settlement on the civil suit. $15,000 is reasonable compensation for what you went through, and it means you don't have to sit through a trial. As for the criminal case, that's up to the prosecutor, not you. But I think the plea deal is fair. She'll have a record and she'll be on probation. One more incident and she goes to jail. I thought about it for a day, talking it over with Marcus and a few other neighbors who had been supportive throughout this whole ordeal. Everyone agreed that the settlement made sense. I wasn't trying to destroy Brenda's life. I just wanted to live in my house in peace. I told Daniel to accept the settlement offer. 2 weeks later, I received a check for $15,000, along with a signed agreement that Brenda would not contact me, enter my property, or file any further complaints against me for any reason. Violation of the agreement would result in additional penalties. The criminal case was resolved a month after that. Brenda pled no contest to false reporting, received 2 years of probation, a $1,000 fine, and 100 hours of community service. The judge also ordered her to attend anger management counseling. Gerald Hopkins called me the day after the sentencing. The board held another vote last night. Brenda officially resigned from the HOA board entirely. Her probation terms apparently prohibit her from holding positions of authority while she's under supervision. How's the neighborhood taking it? Honestly, most people are relieved. We've had 3 homeowners come forward asking the board to review past fines that Brenda levied against them. We're going to do a complete audit of her enforcement actions over the past 5 years. That sounds like a lot of work. It is, but it's necessary. Stephanie has stepped up to help, and we're looking for new board members who actually want to serve the community, not control it. He paused. Isaac, I want to thank you. I know this whole thing was hell for you, but you did something important. You stood up to a bully, And you showed everyone else in this neighborhood that they don't have to live in fear of their own HOA. After we hung up, I walked outside to check my mail. It was a gorgeous Phoenix evening, the temperature finally dropping from brutal to merely warm as winter approached. My generator sat on the side of my house, barely visible behind the fence, ready to keep my power running if we had another grid failure. The propane tanks were full, professionally maintained, and exactly where they belonged. Gary was outside across the street, watering his lawn. When he saw me, he raised his hand in a tentative wave. I waved back. It wasn't his fault his wife had turned into a nightmare. Marcus pulled up in his driveway and walked over, grinning. "Hey, I heard you got paid. Drinks on you, sure, but we're staying here. I've earned the right to enjoy my own patio without worrying about someone calling the cops on me." We sat outside for hours that night, drinking beer and talking about everything except HOA drama. Other neighbors stopped by. The Johnsons with their kids, Mrs. Patterson with homemade cookies, even elderly Mr. Kowalski, who had moved back to the neighborhood after hearing that Brenda was gone. "I loved my house," he told me, settling into a patio chair with a sigh. "I shouldn't have had to leave because some power-hungry tyrant decided my wheelchair ramp was unsightly. When I heard what you did, standing up to her, I called my old realtor. Turns out my house is back on the market. I'm buying it again." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for him. "It's more than wonderful, it's justice." He raised his beer. "To Isaac Lawson, the man who took down the HOA Karen." Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. I felt embarrassed but also proud. I hadn't set out to be some kind of neighborhood hero. I had just wanted to install a backup generator and be left alone. But sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. The rest of the winter passed peacefully. The HOA board, under Gerald's leadership, reformed their enforcement procedures, requiring multiple board members to sign off on any violation notice before it could be sent. They also established an appeals process so homeowners could challenge fines without having to hire an attorney. I tested my generator system twice more, once during a planned maintenance check and once during an actual power outage in January. Both times it worked perfectly, keeping my house running while the rest of the neighborhood sat in the dark. Several neighbors asked me about the system afterward, and I was happy to share the contractor's information. Brenda and Gary kept to themselves across the street. I'd see them occasionally, but Brenda never made eye contact. Gary would wave sometimes, always looking vaguely apologetic. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that they were thinking of selling the house and moving to a different community. I wished them well, silently, but was relieved at the thought of them leaving. Marcus and I became close friends through the whole ordeal, the kind of friendship that's forged through adversity. We had standing Thursday night plans for beer and pizza, alternating between his house and mine. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said one evening, about 6 months after everything had settled down. "Before you moved in, everyone just accepted that Brenda was in charge and there was nothing we could do about it. Now people actually participate in HOA meetings. They run for board positions. They actually care about the community instead of just trying to avoid Brenda's wrath." "I just wanted my propane tank," I said, laughing. "Yeah, but you also showed everyone that bullies can be beaten. You documented everything, got legal help and followed through. Most people don't do that. They just move away or give in." He was right, I suppose, but I hadn't felt brave at the time. I had felt angry and violated and determined not to let someone take advantage of me just because they had a title and a clipboard. The following spring, the Sunridge Estates HOA held elections for the 2 vacant board positions. Stephanie Ruiz was re-elected, and 2 new members joined, Marcus Chen and Mrs. Patterson. Gerald stayed on as president, and together they worked to make the HOA what it was supposed to be. A group of neighbors working together to maintain property values and community standards, not a weapon for petty tyrants. They repealed several of Brenda's more ridiculous rules, including the restrictions on mailbox colors and the ban on vegetable gardens in front yards. They also voted to refund many of the excessive fines that had been levied over the years, using HOA reserve funds that Brenda had been hoarding. I attended that meeting, watching as family after family received checks for hundreds or thousands of dollars that Brenda had extracted from them over the years. Mrs. Patterson cried when she got her $1,500 back. The Johnsons used their refund to buy new playground equipment for their kids. When the meeting ended, Gerald approached me. "Isaac, have you ever thought about joining the board? We could use someone with your attention to detail and willingness to stand up for what's right." I considered it, genuinely flattered. "I appreciate the offer, Gerald, but I think I've had enough HOA drama for one lifetime. I'll support good board members like you and Marcus, but I'm happy just being a regular homeowner." "Fair enough. But if you ever change your mind, the offer stands." That summer was hot, even by Phoenix standards. We hit 118 degrees in July, and the power grid struggled under the demand. My generator kicked on twice during brief outages, and both times I was grateful for the system that had caused so much trouble. I also noticed something interesting. 5 other houses in the neighborhood installed similar generator systems. They all came to me first for advice, wanting to know what the process was like and whether the HOA would give them problems. "Just follow the rules," I told them. "Get your permits, use a licensed contractor, and make sure nothing's visible from the street. The new board is reasonable. You won't have any issues." And they didn't. The HOA approved each installation without complaint, exactly the way the system was supposed to work. One August evening, I was sitting on my patio reading when Gary appeared at my fence line. He looked older than I remembered, worn down by something. "Isaac, do you have a minute?" he asked quietly. "Sure, come on in." He sat down in one of my patio chairs, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize. For Brenda, for everything. I should have stopped her sooner. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I just kept hoping she'd calm down on her own." "Gary, you don't have to apologize for her behavior. She made her own choices." "I know. But I enabled it by not standing up to her. You're the first person who really fought back, and it made me realize how bad things had gotten." He sighed deeply. "We're getting divorced. I filed papers last week." "I hadn't expected that. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's been a long time coming." The HOA thing was just the final straw. She's on probation, she's in court-ordered counseling, and she still doesn't think she did anything wrong. She blames you for everything. That's not surprising. The house is going on the market next month. I'm moving to Tucson, starting over. Brenda's going to stay with her sister in Scottsdale. He stood up. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone across the street was against you, and I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for having the courage to do what I couldn't, for standing up to her. Maybe if someone had done it years ago, things wouldn't have gotten so bad." He shook my hand. "Good luck, Isaac. You deserve some peace after all this." After he left, I sat on my patio for a long time, watching the sun set over the Phoenix skyline. The whole situation felt surreal when I thought back on it. All of this, all the drama and stress and legal battles, had started because I wanted a backup power system for my house. Because Brenda saw something she wanted and thought she could bully me into giving it to her. But it had also revealed something important about community and standing up for what's right. It had brought neighbors together, gotten rid of a tyrant, and reformed an HOA system that had been broken for years. Good had come from it, even if the process had been hell. Marcus came over later with pizza, our Thursday night tradition continuing. "Did you hear the Hoffmeyers are selling? Gary stopped by earlier, he told me. Good riddance to Brenda. Gary's not so bad though, I feel kind of bad for him." "Me too. He was stuck in an impossible situation." We ate pizza and talked about normal things. Work, sports, Marcus's new girlfriend. It felt good to have a conversation that didn't revolve around HOA drama or legal battles. "You know what I realized the other day?" Marcus said, reaching for another slice. "When you moved in, you told me you were looking for a quiet neighborhood where you could work from home in peace." "Yeah, that didn't exactly work out as planned." "No, but look at it now. Brenda's gone, the HOA is functional, and the neighborhood actually is quiet and peaceful." "You got what you wanted. You just had to fight for it first." He had a point. Sunridge Estates had become exactly what I hoped for when I bought the house. I could work without drama. My generator system kept me powered up during outages, and my neighbors were friendly and supportive instead of fearful and isolated. Fall arrived, bringing slightly cooler temperatures and the snowbirds returning from their summer migrations north. The new neighbors who bought the Hoffmeyer house were a young couple with twins, and they threw a block party to introduce themselves. It was nice, the whole neighborhood coming together for something positive instead of rallying around someone being victimized by the HOA. The criminal case against Brenda officially closed in November when she completed her community service hours, and the judge signed off on her probation progress. Detective Brennan called to let me know it was done. She followed the terms of her probation, attended all her counseling sessions, and paid her fines, the detective said. She'll be on probation for another year, but barring any new incidents, this case is closed from our perspective. Thank you for everything, Detective. I know this wasn't the kind of case you usually work. Cases like yours matter more than you think, Mr. Lawson. When people abuse power, whether it's in an HOA or anywhere else, it damages communities. I'm glad you pursued it, and I'm glad we could help. After that call, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't even realized I was missing. It was truly over. Brenda was gone, the legal battles were finished, and life could return to normal. The holidays came and went. I hosted Thanksgiving dinner at my house, inviting Marcus, Mrs. Patterson, the Johnsons, and a few other neighbors who had become friends through the whole ordeal. We ate too much, told stories, and celebrated being part of a community that functioned the way it was supposed to. As winter turned toward spring again, I found myself reflecting on the entire experience. If someone had told me a year ago that buying a backup generator would lead to criminal charges, a civil lawsuit, and the overthrow of a tyrannical HOA president, I would have thought they were insane. But that's exactly what had happened. The generator itself was still running perfectly, maintained according to the manufacturer's schedule. I had used it 4 times over the course of the year during various power outages, and each time I was grateful for the foresight to install it. The propane tank sat on the side of my house, completely invisible from the street, exactly as they were supposed to be. Sometimes I'd look at those tanks and think about everything they had represented. To me, they were about preparedness and self-sufficiency. To Brenda, they had been about control and the audacity of someone not following her demands. That fundamental difference in perspective had led to months of conflict that never should have happened. But it did happen, and I had handled it. I had documented everything, gotten legal help, stood my ground, and seen justice served. Brenda faced criminal charges and civil penalties. The HOA was reformed. The neighborhood was better off. Marcus was right that night when he said I'd gotten the quiet neighborhood I wanted. I just had to fight for it first. And maybe that's true of most good things in life. They don't just happen. You have to stand up for them, even when it's hard, even when you're dealing with someone who seems to have all the power. A year after the whole thing started, on a Saturday morning in May, I was in my driveway washing my car when a moving truck pulled up to a house down the street. New neighbors were arriving, and I walked down to introduce myself, the way good neighbors do. The family was friendly. A husband, wife, and teenage daughter moving from California. As we talked, the husband mentioned he was thinking about installing a backup generator system. The power situation in Phoenix seems unstable, he said. We want to be prepared. I smiled, thinking about everything that simple decision had triggered for me. I have a system installed. It's worked great. I can give you my contractor's information if you want. That would be fantastic. Any issues with the HOA? Not anymore, I said. The HOA here is actually pretty reasonable. Just make sure you follow the process, get your permits, and you'll be fine. As I walked back to my house, I felt proud of that answer. The HOA was reasonable now. The process worked. New homeowners could install generators or make improvements without fear of harassment or bullying. All because I had refused to give up my backup propane tank to a Karen who thought she was entitled to it. Sometimes the smallest battles lead to the biggest victories. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for an entire community. And sometimes a propane tank is more than just a propane tank. It's a line in the sand, a refusal to be bullied, and the beginning of real change. I finished washing my car, went inside to my comfortable house with its reliable backup power system, and got back to living the quiet, peaceful life I had moved to Sunridge Estates to find. The life I had fought for and earned. The life that was finally, genuinely mine.